First time I ever read the name Red Clay Strays. It was on a Beaumont Summer Sundown series hosted at the Event Center in Beaumont, Texas. Emily Wheeler brought them into Beaumont, and it was a free concert. And the look of the band paired with their name really did intrigue me. I went to the show and I remember being starstruck at their sound and the way Brandon moved about the stage. It was refreshing to see the freedom in movement and the music. I went up to them after the show and I spoke to them from the ground while they stood on the stage loading up their gear. And I told them about Seven Oaks and how I would love to try and host them one day. And this was in 2021. So they told me to message them on their Instagram, and I did. And a year later, they got management, so I reached out to them. All this time, I'm still reaching out, like, hey, have you heard, blah, blah, blah. And so at this point, they're like, hey, we got management, so, reach out to them. And I did, and then in 22, they finally could confirm a show here. So their manager, Cody Payne, would later tell me it was the last show of the tour that he booked here. So I felt like, whew, we just made it, good timing on the emails or whatever it was. But so November 10th, 2023 was the day we picked, and tickets went on sale in January, and like almost all shows here, they sat for the first few months. In my mind, they were blowing up and tickets were moving, but not as fast as I had thought. By June, they were finally getting the attention they needed around here, and the show did finally sell out. But like most good patrons of live music, they emailed and called and asked to be placed on a waiting list, and so I obliged. I won't lie. This whole time, I was extremely nervous about how to fit John Hall and all his character into the rabbit hole. I would lay awake at night thinking, how can I possibly open up these doors, this room, to accommodate those drums? And nothing ever made sense. It was like I needed to be able to do something in the pasture in order to, I guess, really in order to sleep at night. But so we opened up the waiting list, and it grew to 50 names, and I reached out to Cody and I pitched the idea. I said, how do you feel about us opening the show back up, selling more seats so that I can afford a tent, some staging, lights, and sound? And he said, quote, sure, let me know where it lands, end quote. So I opened it back up and we sold it out again within 2 weeks to a total of 212 seats. So I got the tent, sound, and additional seating arranged, and now all we needed was November 10th to arrive. So the week called for rain, of course, and colder than average temps for here in Southeast Texas. So like my anxiety commanded, we put the tent up 2 days early to beat the rain and hopefully shed any water. This plan worked well until I realized the tent had around 30 pinholes that leaked, and that the rain on the outside of the tent walls chased ants inside the tent walls. So the day prior to the show, we were taping holes and spraying for ants. Just all those things you learn when you're doing things like this with a tent and rain. So there were a couple of holes above the stage that we couldn't reach or tape. I remember the tent guys, they had to come out like 2 different days to tape the holes. And on the second day prior to the show, they were like, we ran out of white tape. Mind you, this is a white tent. And they're like, we ran out of white tape. And he's like, we got to run back to Beaumont. I was like, no, we're not running back to Beaumont. What else do you have? I said, or I have like some duct tape. He goes, well, we have black tape. I'm like, fine. So here's this white tent. It's not a nice white tent. It's just a tent. And it has white tape, and now it has black tape. And the black tape, probably about 20 pieces of tape. So I say 30 pinholes, but it was really like probably more like 50 holes in this tent. So anyway, there were a couple holes above the stage that they couldn't reach or tape, so I strategically placed some potted plants underneath those areas and just kind of like said a prayer. So the band was playing in Central Texas just before routing here, and they were due to load in at 4:30. We load in just about every band 4:30 to 5, but as luck would have it, their bus had issues. So they were looking at like a 6:30 load in, and we also had Sam Morrow open in the show. So it's kind of a lot when you have two full bands and one of them's running late, the headliner's running late, and you're in a different setting. You're not sure how the tent's going to sound once you get everything going. And so anyway, it adds to the stress of it all. But so they're looking at a 6:30 load in, and John Hall needed new drum heads. And so now I'm trying to find a courier of some sort that can go. And I called a few people, and one of them thought they could, then they couldn't. And so I actually ended up getting with Cole, and he had his sound tech that helps him out run to Guitar Center. So now it's, we got the drum heads coming in, and the night air is rolling in. It's misty. It's cold, but no heavy rain, thank God. So the band loads in, and we're working to keep the guests out of the tent so they could sound check. And my first encounter with the band as they loaded onto the stage was two things. Man, I can't believe they are here, and boy, do they look tired. And I like the fact that Brandon, he doesn't travel. I mean, like he has his stage hair, and so his hair is just like all down in his face, and he's trying to load in, and I'm not trying to bother. But I did thank him for coming and welcomed him and to our makeshift stage, and then just telling the story about how we sold it out twice, and having to tell people that they were a mix of Elvis, Johnny Cash, the Beatles, Buddy Holly, and Creedence Clearwater Revival. And Brandon had finally looked up at that point and nodded yes, and he said, quote, "Yeah, that sounds about right," end quote. So, or something to that nature. But so sound check was done, and Sam Morrow was due to take the stage as the opener within about 30 minutes. And I remember telling the crowd that if for some reason they got a drop of water where they were sitting, we would give them a free coffee mug. But they had to shout hallelujah, and if the water hit them, the crowd had to respond amen. So we all got a good laugh. It's a revival tent, so it was so much of a revival feel in there that I even put my dad's carved sign that said gospel singing right there in the entryway. So this is I guess 2 years, 2 years after my dad's passing. But so the signs at the door, or the opening of the tent, and hallelujahs and amens if they get hit by water. So I gave the normal spiel, thanked them for coming, thanks for supporting live music. It's, again, this is the kind of space that lets you sit and enjoy. If you came to talk about your week, step outside, etc. And people always tell me they're grateful for that speech before all the shows. And so the show progressed, and it came time to ask Brandon the infamous question of 3 seats. And so, we had a video that I was able to somehow get his response, but here's his response here.
I know Zach said Ronnie Van Zant from Leonard Skinner. And our drummer's brother, Jacob Hall. And probably Jesus.
So as you can see, there's no wrong answers there, and I thought his answers were great. The night carried on, and before you knew it, people couldn't stay seated any longer. And so they created a dance for themselves there in front of the stage and danced to the Red Clay Strays on our red rose rug that was up there. And it was a kind of moment where it's like you could tell everybody they just couldn't sit still any longer. It was what good music is supposed to do, right? So Brandon, he even came down from the stage to dance with them, and I mean, it was fabulous. It was just kind of magic good music creates. And it's easy to say that, music is physics and energy, but not all music moves you like the Red Clay Strays and a few others can. So that was kind of the turning point of the night for me, where it was like, this is why we have live music. This is it right here. So the night ended with an extended 30-minute or so encore, and the folks went home, and the Red Clay Strays slept in their bus in the driveway. I had gotten them 5 rooms at the local hotel, but after a couple of them had showered in the house, I asked Cody why they weren't taking the rooms, and he said he must have missed them on the contract and didn't realize they had any. So John, Zach, and Drew sat around the fire pits around midnight, and Brandon, earlier he had taken a picture in my 1965 Mustang. And I remember him saying, they didn't make these for tall people, did they? And then he turned in early. I'll never forget standing at the fridge in what we call the cafe, cleaning up this sugary liquid that we had put into dispensers. I am like frantically trying to get all this stuff out of the fridge, and I feel someone standing behind me. And I turn around to see Brandon standing there just waiting patiently to ask me a question. And so I'm like, hey, hi, what can I get you? And he's not a man of many words off stage at all. He said, I was just looking for some soda, Coke or something. And so I got him some, and he went back to the bus. But the most notable item on their rider was the Nelson's Greenbrier whiskey, and we still carry it today. It's on the menu as the Red Clay Rider. It's Nelson's and soda. And so the guys headed out the next morning around 8:20, and I remember shedding 2 big old tears. 1, because I was so exhausted, and 2, I knew they would never be back because they'd made it. 2 years later, we'd see them win the CMA Vocalist of the Year and more, and I knew they were breaking that ceiling, and they were going to be too expensive to ever host again. It was a once-in-a-lifetime, don't-miss kind of evening. And I've had a few other opportunities to go see them live, including this month at the rodeo. I have and likely forever will turn down any chance to see them live because I want their show here at Seven Oaks to live in my brain and mind's eye forever. It was 212 people, a white 40 by 80 tent, Christmas lights strung zigzag left to right, potted plants catching the drops of rain, and tape on the ceilings. So, where their music became magic and Southeast Texas felt a little less forgotten. So I'd have to say that's how I feel anytime an artist comes here to play. It's like we are seen and life is just a little bit more bearable. So, till next time.